Pretty heavy. All right, this is James. James, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and so on.
Yeah, so most of you know me by now, but my name's James and I'm married to Julie, who sat at the back there, and we've got two little boys, Judah and Joshua. Judah's with us today. We live up in Pontrhydyfen. I've lived in Wales now since I was 18. So I moved to Cardiff to study chemistry at university there, and then I stayed on afterwards to do a PhD in chemistry, which we're going to talk a little bit about in a minute.
Fab. So your PhD then, James, well, it was in chemistry, but a particular field of chemistry?
Yeah, so my chemistry was mainly making different types of plastics, which is something perhaps we're all familiar with now. And the aim of these plastics was twofold. One was to try and get them to store hydrogen. So there's a lot in the news at the moment about electric cars, isn't there? Everyone wants to get an electric car. I wouldn't get one yet, by the way, but that's completely off topic. I would wait a few years, but there we go. Hydrogen would be an alternative to just charging a battery for a car. So you would go to the petrol station, you'd fill up your car with hydrogen, and that would run the electric fuel cell on board. The problem is the storage of hydrogen, though. It's if you've ever worked with hydrogen, it's very explosive, very flammable. So it was finding different safe ways of storing hydrogen. So we were making these plastics that could actually absorb hydrogen, and therefore we could potentially have them on board to have a safe storage of hydrogen. But also these materials could also capture carbon dioxide, which is very topical at the moment as well. So trying to make plastics that you could put over an exhaust pipe and they would let some gases out but not others. So it was a lot of time in the lab actually making different substances and testing their properties with regards to hydrogen storage and carbon capture. So it was fascinating stuff.
You all follow that?
Oh, good.
So I guess that establishes James is clever. We're not. So you know, with your studies, PhD,
yes,
and so on, did you find any of that kind of difficult to reconcile with your Christian faith? I don't know what point you became a Christian, but were you coming up against things in science and thinking, "Oh, this just doesn't fit with my faith in God, my Christianity, and so on"?
What I would find is that most of the people I worked with, or most of the people I was friends with in the university circles, didn't have a Christian faith. So you would face the kind of common objections to science and faith, such as things like, well, if you believe the Bible, therefore do you believe in a 6,000-year-old Earth as opposed to a 5-billion-year-old Earth, and things like that. So yes and no, really. But I think when people approach these questions of sort of science versus God, I think they look at it the wrong way. And I always look at it as not how the earth was made, but who made the earth. That's the starting point I think we have to get to. Before we get into the mechanics of how it actually happened, we have to look at who made the earth. And that is the fundamental question for us all this morning. Because if we're here as a result of sheer random chance, it's a pretty depressing reality, isn't it? If all we are is just atoms that are randomly stuck together to make human beings, it's pretty depressing. Whereas if we are made by a loving God, then we have infinite worth and infinite value. So I think that's the fundamental starting point that we need to have when we're looking at these issues. It's not how it was done, but who it was done by. So we look in, for instance, Genesis 1, the very, very first verse of the Bible, and it says, "In the beginning, God." And that's where we've got to start, isn't it? In the beginning, God. Or in Job 38, it says, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand." So with science, we're kind of treading in the very shallows of a vast ocean. And I find the more I study science, the more I try and get to grips with it, the more I realise how little I actually know. And actually, that's what's great about science. I think science really should be the study of God's majesty, of his awesomeness. That's what we're doing with science. We're trying to find out more about God's creation. I think sometimes we get it a little bit wrong, don't we? And we pit science against God as if they're sort of two counter arguments.
Absolutely. So is there anything in science that you thought, actually, that points me to see the existence of God rather than pointing me against the existence of God?
Yes, definitely. You can all see me at the moment, I assume. You've got two incredible eyeballs in you that are enabling you to see me. You might not be so grateful looking at me, I don't know. But just stop for a second and think of your senses at the moment. The fact that you can look around the room, that you can feel the breeze I'm sat by the fan, actually, so I'm in luck here, but you can feel the breeze, perhaps. You can hear what I'm saying. You can touch whatever you're sat on. We have incredible senses. I was looking up the eyeball just to share a few little facts about a human eyeball. Well, the human brain has 12 billion cells in it. So that's 12 with 9 zeros after it. It's an incredibly huge number. And then there's 120 trillion, so add another 3 zeros to that, connections between all the cells in your brain. And then you get to the light-sensitive part of the eye, and you've got 10 million photoreceptor cells that are turning that light and turning it into electrical signals and sending it all the way through your body. It's incredible, isn't it? The probability of evolving something into an eyeball, which is so complex, is so slim that we can almost discount it. It really is so slim. There's a concept in science called entropy, and it's basically the idea that things go from disorder to disorder. You probably know that if you don't tidy your bedroom for very long. It gets messier and messier and messier. Or if you leave something in the fridge, it gets worse and worse and worse over time. Things don't tend to go from disorder to order unless you put work into it. And that's, the odds of something like an eyeball, and that's just one example of evolving by sheer chance, are just so slim. I think it was Isaac Newton who once said that if all he had was a human thumb to look at, with no other evidence, that would be enough proof for him of the existence of God, just by looking at a human thumb, which I found absolutely incredible.
I look at my thumb and it's got dirt in the fingernail, so I won't look at my thumb. Last question, James, this morning. Why is your Christian faith so important to you?
Yeah. So if we go back to that Genesis 1 verse, that God created us. He created us and he wants a relationship with us, and yet we kind of stuff up, don't we, in our walk? We don't do things the way that we should, but we are lovingly made by a God who wants a relationship with us. And what he did is he made a way that we can get back to him, even though that we're sinners, even though that we stuff up. He made a way by sending Jesus to die on the cross for us in our place so that we don't have to suffer the punishment that deserves. That's why Christianity is so important to me, because it is everything. Without it, we have literally nothing. We would be in a horrible, horrible place if it wasn't for the fact that God loved us and that he died for us. So that's why Christianity is absolutely everything to me.
Thanks so much, James. Just finishing off with this then. Obviously, you've got a dislike for electric cars. If anybody ever buys you a Tesla, send it my way. Thanks, James. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Just for the record, I think they're going to be great when they improve the technology.